When I was 7, I found a pendant. It was a drab, grimy thing, lying in the dry creek bed in the hills behind my house. Utterly unremarkable. But I saw it. On a whim, I picked it up. I tucked it into my shirt. On the way home, I tripped and fell. I scraped my knee, and the blood that welled up smudged the pendant. It suddenly seared my skin. When I looked down again, the blood was gone. The pendant seemed a little brighter. I didn't think much of it. Kids forget things easily. Back home, I wiped it down with a rag, threaded it onto an old red cord, and hung it around my neck. And that pendant became my constant companion. Wherever I went, it went with me. My name is Mia. My dad, a scholar who died too young, picked it for me. He said Mia was a good name. Small, unnoticeable, safe. My mother died giving birth to me. My father died of illness when I was 5. The villagers said I was cursed, that I brought misfortune to my family. No one would take me in. So I lived in the crumbling thatched shack my parents left behind. I survived by foraging for wild vegetables, gathering firewood, and occasionally doing odd jobs for the wealthier families in the village. I barely got by. Then I found the pendant. Life didn't seem to change much. I was still hungry when I was hungry. Still called a jinx when people felt like calling me a jinx. But ever since I started wearing it, I didn't feel so cold when I slept at night. It was like having a little furnace, warm and snug against my heart. The winter I turned 10, the snow was especially heavy. I went into the hills to look for food and fell into a hunter's abandoned trap. The pit was deep. I couldn't climb out. The sky grew darker and darker. The snow fell harder and harder. I was cold and hungry and scared. I huddled at the bottom of the pit, hugging my knees and shivering. Just when I thought I was about to freeze to death, the pendant on my chest suddenly became searing hot. A wave of warmth spread through my whole body. In a daze, I thought I heard a voice. It was cold, like an icicle from a mountain stream. Troublesome. And then I knew nothing more. When I woke up, I was lying in bed in my own dilapidated shack. My only tattered quilt was tucked around me. The fire in the stove was still going, and there was steaming hot rice porridge in the pot. I was stunned. Who saved me? Who brought me back? And even started a fire and cooked for me? The villagers? Impossible. They would walk in a wide circle around my shack. I subconsciously touched my chest. The pendant was still there, warm to the touch. Life went on in this muddled way. Strange things started happening more and more often. I'd go up the mountain to pick mushrooms. I'd see a patch of brightly colored, beautiful ones. Just as my fingers were about to touch them, the pendant would suddenly get hot, scalding my hand and making me pull back. Later, I learned those mushrooms were deadly poisonous. When I was chopping wood, my foot would slip, and just as I was about to tumble down a steep slope, my body would steady itself in a bizarre way, as if something had caught me. In the winter, the water in the well froze solid. I wasn't strong enough to break the ice. The next day, there would be a small hole in the ice, just big enough for my bucket. I started to feel that something was very wrong. This pendant. It was strange. I took it off and placed it on the rickety table, staring at it. It was still drab and grimy, still so unremarkable. "Hey," I whispered. "Was it you?" The pendant didn't move. "Was it you who saved me? And gave me hot porridge? And stopped me from eating poisonous mushrooms? And helped me get water?" Still no response. I felt a little disheartened, thinking I must have been half frozen and was just imagining things. But just as I reached out to put it back on, the pendant, very, very slightly, moved under my fingertips, like an impatient nudge. I was so scared I nearly threw it across the room. From that day on, I paid close attention. I started talking to the pendant. "It's a beautiful day today." The pendant didn't react. That bully Danny from the east side of the village stole my vegetables again. He's such a jerk. The pendant seemed to grow a fraction colder. "I'm so hungry. It would be great if a dumb rabbit just ran into a tree." I snuck a peek at the pendant. Not a flicker. I was a little disappointed. The next day, I went to the hills behind my house. And there, near my parents' graves, I saw a fat rabbit, knocked out cold at the base of a tree. I grabbed the rabbit and sprinted all the way home. I held the rabbit up to the pendant, my face flushed with excitement. It was you, wasn't it? The pendant was warm, as if it were basking in the sun, too lazy to bother with me. But I just knew. It was. The realization was a mix of shock, joy, and a little bit of fear. I had found something incredible. When I was 15, a few people in dazzlingly fine clothes came to the village. They flew on gleaming swords, hovering in midair, their robes fluttering. They looked like gods from a painting. Adepts. The villagers went crazy, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. The adepts said they were from the Azure Spire to the east. They were passing through when they sensed a faint aura of power and came to investigate. They were looking for anyone with potential. They took out a transparent crystal orb and had the village children touch it, one by one. Anyone who had an aptitude for magic could be taken away to train at the Celestial Mountains. It was a path to a new life. The kids were practically trampling each other. I shrank to the back of the crowd in my dirty, ragged clothes and messy hair. No one looked at me. I didn't want to go either. Adepts, it all sounded so far away. So complicated. I just wanted to stay in my little shack and live a quiet life. I touched the pendant at my chest. It was warm and steady. Then it was my turn. The village chief grabbed me and shoved me in front of the crystal orb. Venerable adept, let this girl try too, even if she is a jinx. The adept frowned, probably disgusted by how dirty I was. Hesitantly, I placed my hand on it. It was ice cold. The crystal orb didn't react at all. The adept was expressionless. No aptitud. Next. I breathed a sigh of relief. As I was about to step away, my chest suddenly blazed with heat. A tiny, almost imperceptible stream of energy shot from my fingertips and into the crystal orb. The clear orb suddenly exploded with a blinding, pure cyan light. The beam of light shot into the sky, illuminating half the heavens. Everyone was speechless. The adept's eyes nearly popped out of his head. His voice cracked. A celestial aptitude. And a top-tier wood elemental, at that. In this backwater dump, how is this possible? What happened next felt like a dream. The adept, babbling with excitement, whisked me onto his flying sword as if I were a precious treasure. I didn't even have time to go back to my shack. As we ascended, I looked back at the village one last time. It grew smaller and smaller. The pendant on my chest was scorching hot. I pressed my hand against it and thought, don't be afraid. We're leaving this place. The pendant's heat slowly subsided. The Azure Spire was huge. It was shrouded in clouds and mist, with celestial cranes soaring through the air. I was assigned to the outer sect, becoming the lowest-ranking acolyte. The adept who brought me back, a brother Alex, was his name, was my guide. He treated me extremely well, almost fawning over me. Sister Mia, you have a celestial aptitude, something seen only once in a millennium. Your future is limitless. You'll just have to rough it in the acolyte quarters for a few days. Once the aptitude stone confirms it again, the inner sect elders will be fighting to take you as their disciple. He slipped me a few small, glittering stones, telling me they were mana crystals, and that I should use them for now. I nodded, completely bewildered. The man in charge of work assignments for the acolytes, Manager Miller, was a portly middle-aged man. He had been slouching with half-closed eyes, completely dismissive. But as soon as Brother Alex uttered the words celestial aptitude, his fleshy face bloomed into a smile. Sister Mia. Come in, please come in. Why would you stay in the dorms? We'll arrange a private courtyard for you. As for work, no rush, no rush. You rest first. And just like that, I was moved into a clean, tidy private room with a small courtyard. In the crowded acolyte quarters of the outer sect, this was practically an elder's treatment. I touched the pendant on my neck. I felt like I was walking on clouds. It was all so unreal. That night, lying in the soft bedding, I whispered to the pendant. You did that, didn't you? With the crystal orb. The pendant was quiet. That brother Alex said I have a celestial aptitude. What is that? Is it a big deal? The pendant remained silent. Thank you, I said softly. The pendant seemed to move, ever so slightly, brushing against my skin. As if to say, I know. The next day, Brother Alex came again. He took me to the main peak's grand hall to be tested again with a more advanced aptitude stone. Several elders stood in the hall. They had profound auras and looked like ancient sages, their gazes fixed on me. I was a little nervous. Brother Alex motioned for me to place my hand on a massive, shimmering jade stone. I took a deep breath and put my hand on it. A cold sensation. The stone showed no reaction. The anticipation on the elders' faces slowly turned to confusion. Brother Alex grew anxious. That's impossible. Yesterday it clearly. Try again. A white-bearded elder said in a low voice. I tried again. The stone remained inert, like a common rock. The elders looked at each other. Alex, the white-bearded elder said, turning to Brother Alex with a stern tone. Are you certain the testing stone wasn't mistaken yesterday? Perhaps you saw wrong. A cold sweat broke out on Brother Alex's forehead. Elder Caspian, I swear on my life. The cyan light shot into the heavens yesterday. It was absolutely a top-tier wood elemental celestial aptitude. I couldn't have been mistaken. Then why is there no reaction from the aptitude stone today? Another elder with a cold face questioned. I don't know, Brother Alex stammered, unable to defend himself. I just stood there, an object on display, my hands and feet turning cold. The pendant on my chest began to burn. A familiar, tiny stream of energy slowly seeped out, attempting to reach the giant aptitude stone. I could feel its hesitation, its caution. But just as that stream of energy was about to touch the stone's surface, a cold snort, like a clap of thunder, exploded in my mind without warning. It was chilling, imperious, and carried an absolute, crushing pressure. I froze, my mind going blank. The pendant shuddered violently. The stream of energy instantly retracted. Its heat vanished, and it became ice cold, as if it had received a terrible fright. Enough. A middle-aged Taoist sitting at the very head of the hall, who had been meditating with his eyes closed and whose presence was the most ethereal of all, slowly opened his eyes. His gaze swept over me with extreme indifference, as if looking at a speck of dust. This girl's aptitude is a chaotic mess, next to nothing. Alex, your eyes deceived you. Take her away. Assign her as a standard acolyte. His words were final. Brother Alex's face turned ashen. The other elders withdrew their gazes, no longer looking at me. I was led out of the grand hall in a daze. The pendant on my chest was ice cold, like a truly dead piece of jade. It's a long fall from the clouds to the mud, and it only takes a single sentence. Brother Alex became completely cold toward me, even resentful. Manager Miller's smiling face vanished. His eyes were half closed and dismissive again. My private courtyard was gone. I was shoved into the crowded, smelly acolyte dorm. The work assigned to me was the dirtiest and most tiring, cleaning the beast pens. The pens were huge, housing all sorts of creatures for transport, guard duty, and even combat. The stench of dung, fur, and rotting food was overpowering. I had to wake up before dawn every day and use giant brooms and special cleaning tools to clear away the sticky filth until nightfall. The other female acolytes in the dorm looked at me with a mix of mockery and pity. So much for being a celestial aptitude. Turns out she's just a nobody. Exactly. And she got Brother Alex in trouble. What bad luck. Look at how filthy she is. Cleaning up beast crap is all she's good for. I worked in silence, never arguing back. I was used to it. Compared to starving and freezing in the village, being called a jinx, at least here I had food and a place to sleep. But the pendant on my chest, it remained cold. No matter how I spoke to it in my mind, it never responded. It was as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. I knew why. It was because of that voice in the grand hall. That terrifying voice had scared it. Days turned into weeks, and I worked in the beast pens for 3 years. I turned 18. I'd grown a bit taller but was still thin and frail. The sun and wind had roughened my skin. My life was a monotonous cycle of shoveling dung, sweeping, and washing. My only friend was a very old horse in the beast pens, a grayscale. He was too old, his teeth were bad, and he couldn't run anymore. None of the Sect disciples wanted to use him, so he was left here to waste away. When I cleaned his stall, I would secretly give him the slightly softer spirit fruits I had saved. His cloudy eyes would look at me gently, and he would lick my hand with his rough tongue. I called him Old Gray. At night, lying on the hard bunk, I would touch the cold pendant and talk to it in Old Gray. The sun was really strong today. Old Gray's appetite seems a little better. The manager skimmed from the acolyte's meals again. So corrupt. That fire plume bird in the next pen shot flames at someone again. Good thing I was fast. The pendant gave no response. But I got used to talking to myself. At least it made me feel less alone. The trouble started after a cleaning assignment. That day, I was tasked with cleaning a remote, abandoned training ground in the back hills. It was supposedly used to tame ferocious beasts long ago, but had since fallen into disuse. The area was large and overgrown with weeds, with rusted cages and broken equipment piled in the corners. I kept my head down, focused on finishing the job quickly. Suddenly, the ground gave way. The rotten floorboards couldn't take my weight and collapsed. I screamed as I fell. It was a deep pit, pitch black. I landed on the damp, cold earth, feeling like all my bones were broken. I struggled to get up. It was completely dark, except for a sliver of light from the hole above. The air was thick with a musty smell and the scent of blood. I fumbled around, trying to find a way to climb out. My fingers brushed against something cold and hard. It felt like a metal box. Using the faint light, I could see it was a palm-sized black iron box, half buried in the dirt. The box was covered in complex engravings that gave off an ancient aura. The smell of blood was coming from the box. My heart pounded. My instincts screamed that this was not a good thing. I wanted to get away from it. But just then, the pendant on my chest, which had been silent for 3 years, suddenly erupted with a searing heat. It was so hot I almost cried out. Then a powerful, unprecedented thought slammed into my mind. It wasn't a voice, just a crystal clear, urgent command. Take it. The sudden mental command stunned me. 3 years. It finally reacted. And it wanted me to pick up this sinister box? This thing doesn't seem right. I muttered, resisting. The pendant got even hotter. The command grew stronger, carrying an undeniable authority. Take it. Now. Immediately. It felt like if I didn't, it would burn a hole straight through my chest. The heat was unbearable, and I was terrified something would happen to it. Gritting my teeth, I steeled myself and grabbed the cold iron box. The instant my fingers touched it, boom. A sinister, violent, hate-filled energy, like a cold, venomous snake, shot up my arm and flooded my body. Ah! I screamed, feeling my blood turn to ice. Countless malicious, fragmented images and roars exploded in my head. Kill, kill, kill. All of you will die. Pain. Despair. Hatred. My vision went black. My head felt like it was splitting open. I felt my very soul being torn apart. Just as I was about to be consumed by this terrifying torrent of malevolence, VMMMM. The pendant on my chest exploded with an unprecedented, blazing light. A warm, vast, and power, pure and magnificent as the rising sun, surged from my chest. It instantly drove out the chilling that had invaded my body. The power was impossibly dominant, rushing straight toward the iron box in my hand. The box trembled violently, emitting a piercing hum. The black patterns on its surface writhed as if they were alive, releasing a thick black miasma as they tried to resist. But the warm power was overwhelmingly strong, like a furnace, suppressing and incinerating the black miasma. Umph. A barely audible, disdainful snort echoed in my mind. It came from the pendant. Then, the warm power contracted sharply. The black miasma from the box was instantly sucked dry, as if swallowed by a whale. The humming stopped. The black patterns on the box lost their luster and dimmed. Even the scent of blood vanished. The whole box became plain, even a little shabby. The sinister energy that had almost killed me was gone without a trace. I collapsed to the ground, drenched in a cold sweat, gasping for air like I'd just been pulled from the water. The pendant on my chest slowly cooled, returning to a gentle warmth. A very faint, slightly weary thought reached me. Keep it. My nerves still frayed. I looked at the now harmless iron box in my hand. The terrifying aura, the pendant's explosive power, it had all been real. What is this? My voice trembled. The pendant didn't answer. It seemed that last burst had drained it, and it had fallen silent again. I hid the now ordinary iron box in the innermost layer of my clothes. I climbed out of the pit and pretended nothing had happened, continuing my cleaning. Back in my dorm, late at night, I finally dared to take out the iron box to examine it. There was no lock, but it was sealed tight. I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. I muttered to the pendant. It didn't respond. I turned it over and over. On the bottom, there seemed to be a few tiny, almost worn-away ancient characters. I leaned in close, squinting in the moonlight. Umbral casket. The umbral casket. My heart skipped a beat. The name alone was terrifying. A demon sealed inside? Was that torrent of hate the remnant of a sealed monster? And the pendant absorbed it? So now the box is empty? I shivered and didn't dare to think about it anymore. I quickly hid the box. This thing was too much trouble. Life returned to normal. The pendant went back to sleep, though it would occasionally give off a little warmth. Shoveling beast dung, feeding Old Grey, getting hassled by the manager, listening to the other acolytes gossip. Until a month later, when the sect suddenly became lively. Lanterns and banners were hung everywhere. The disciples all had excited looks on their faces. I asked around and found out that the sect's decennial grand induction was about to begin. More importantly, the legendary Lord Caspian, who had been in seclusion for 100 years, had emerged. Lord Caspian, the unshakable pillar of the Azure Spire. A legendary figure whose power was said to be boundless, who had long since stopped meddling in worldly affairs, spending his years wandering or in seclusion. He was an existence the entire world of adepts looked up to. He was going to personally preside over this year's induction ceremony. The entire sect was buzzing. Even we acolytes were ordered to clean the beast pens inside and out until they were spotless. What if the great lord happened to pass by? I listened to all the excited chatter without much feeling. A great lord. He was too far removed from my life. Right now, I was only worried about Old Grey. His spirit had been getting worse lately, and he barely ate anything. I secretly saved my own portion of the softest fruits for him, but he would only manage a few weak licks. Looking into his dull, lifeless eyes broke my heart. One day, after much pleading, I managed to get a small handful of low-grade, energy-boosting spirit herbs from the sister in charge of the herb garden. During the midday break, when no one was around, I snuck into Old Grey's stall. "Old Grey, look what I brought you," I whispered, holding the herbs to his mouth. Old Grey laboriously lifted his head, sniffed, and slowly curled his tongue around a single stalk, chewing with great difficulty. I stroked his dry mane, my heart aching. Just then cough. A very soft cough came from behind me. I jumped and whirled around. A man in a moon-white robe was standing silently outside the wooden stall. I don't know how long he'd been there. He stood tall, with a cold, solitary air about him. His face was so handsome it didn't seem real. His ink-black hair was held back by a simple jade pin. His features were sharp, deep-set eyes, a high-bridged nose, and thin lips pressed into a neutral line. But what was most striking were his eyes. The pupils were incredibly pale, almost transparent, like melting snow or the purest ice. At this moment, those cool eyes were looking calmly at me, and the herbs in my hand. He had no threatening presence, but his very existence seemed to wall off the surrounding noise and filth. The stench of the entire beast pen seemed to recede from him. My mind went blank. Although I had never seen him, in the entire sect, only one person could have such an aura. Lord Caspian? My voice trembled. My knees went weak, and I was about to fall to them. I'm done for. I stole herbs to feed an old horse, and the great lord himself caught me red-handed. There is no need. His cool voice, like the chime of jade bells, carried no emotion. An invisible force supported me, preventing me from kneeling. I stood frozen, still clutching the herbs, at a total loss. My heart was hammering. His gaze swept over the dying Old Grey, then returned to my face. His pale eyes were unreadable. His life is ending. The herbs are useless. His voice was calm, stating a fact. A pang of sadness hit me. I knew he was right. I know. I said, my head bowed, my voice muffled. He's too old. He can't eat hard things. I just wanted to make his last few days a little more comfortable. Silence filled the stall, broken only by Old Gray's heavy breathing. I could feel Lord Caspian's gaze still on me. After a few moments, he suddenly spoke, asking a completely unrelated question. "The thing around your neck. Where did you get it?" I froze, instinctively covering my chest. The pendant was hidden under my clothes. How did he know? I found it. When I was a child. I answered honestly, not daring to look up. He fell silent again. The air seemed to solidify. Just as my palms began to sweat with nervousness, I heard him say coolly, "Since you found it, keep it safe." With that, he turned. The hem of his moon-white robe brushed against the filthy ground, but remained spotless. His figure flickered and vanished, as if he had never been there. I stood there, stunned, for a long time. My back was covered in cold sweat. He asked about the pendant? Does he know it? Old Gray nudged my hand with difficulty, snapping me out of it. I looked at him, then at the spot where the Lord had disappeared, my mind a tangled mess. The day of the grand induction was an unprecedented spectacle. The main plaza was a sea of people. Countless youths from all over, dreaming of becoming adepts, were lined up for the aptitude test. The Sect's upper echelon sat on a high platform. In the center sat Lord Caspian himself. He wore a simple white robe, his expression detached, as if the noisy crowd below had nothing to do with him. As an acolyte, I could only stand in a far corner of the plaza, looking up at the high platform. The sunlight was a bit glaring. I couldn't see his expression clearly, only that his figure seemed as distant as a cloud in the sky. I touched the pendant at my chest. It was warm, as if responding to me. "Don't even bother looking. He'll never be yours." A sharp, female voice piped up beside me. It was Leah, one of the acolytes from my dorm. She had always been jealous of the few days I was treated as a celestial aptitude. "That's Lord Caspian. Even the true disciples of the inner sect rarely get to see him. Who do you think you are? A dung shoveler?" she sneered. I ignored her, my gaze drifting back to the high platform. Just then the pendant at my chest, without any warning, gave a sudden, sharp jolt. A very subtle thought, filled with intense repulsion and disgust, shot into my mind. Its target was aimed directly at the high platform. I was startled. Repulsion? Disgust? At who? On the platform, there was only Lord Caspian. The pendant loathed Lord Caspian? Why? Thinking back to the other day, when he asked about the pendant, and how quiet it had been in his presence, did they know each other? Did they have a history? Before I could figure it out, a thunderous cheer erupted from the plaza. A celestial aptitude. Another one. A fire elemental. The light is so strong. I looked toward the testing stone. A handsome, richly dressed young man stood there, full of confidence. The stone in front of him was erupting with a blazing red light. The elders on the platform all nodded, their faces alight with joy. Excellent. A fine seedling. This boy's fire aptitude is pure and dominant. Truly rare. Even Lord Caspian, who had been meditating, opened his eyes slightly, his gaze falling on the young man. The young man was named Caleb. He came from a well-known family of adepts. Without any suspense, he was immediately taken as a personal disciple by an elder famous for his mastery of fire. In that moment, he was the center of attention. I watched the radiant young man, feeling no particular emotion. I just subconsciously touched the pendant on my chest. It was quiet again. After the ceremony, the beast pens got even busier. The newly inducted disciples needed mounts, and some of the old, weak beasts needed to be dealt with. The manager gave me the task of taking care of Old Gray completely. He's about to die anyway. You'll be responsible for seeing him off. Save someone else from getting their hands dirty, the manager said, waving his hand impatiently. I knew he just found it unlucky. Old Gray's condition worsened. He spent most of his time in a stupor, his breathing shallow. The sadness in my heart grew heavier each day. One evening, I brought a bucket of clean water to wash Old Gray. As I neared his stall, I heard an arrogant, domineering voice from inside. This old nag is an eyesore, taking up space, and it stinks. Manager, get it out of here now. My heart tightened. I rushed in. 2 people were standing in the stall. One was Manager Miller, bowing and scraping. The other was the new star disciple, Caleb. He wore the brand new uniform of an inner sect disciple, his posture arrogant, his face filled with undisguised disgust. He was pointing at Old Gray, who was curled up on a pile of straw, barely breathing. Master Caleb. Manager Miller saw me and looked relieved. Mia, you're just in time. Master Caleb needs this stall for his new flame mane steed. Get this old horse out of here. Find a place and bury it. Bury it. Caleb sneered, his eyes sweeping over Old Gray with contempt. This old thing is reeking of death. Burying it would just pollute the ground. I say, just drag it to the boneyard in the back hills and let the wild dogs have it. Saves trouble. You. I trembled with rage. I stood in front of Old Gray, glaring at Caleb. He's not dead yet. Not dead. Caleb looked at me as if I'd told the world's greatest joke. He sized me up, his expression even more disdainful. An acolyte dares to talk back to an inner sect master? Are you tired of living? A searing heat radiated from him. A wave of heat washing over me. My chest constricted. It felt like I was being roasted over a fire, and I could hardly breathe. Master Caleb, calm down, please calm down. Manager Miller's face went white. He shoved me hard. Mia, are you looking to die? Apologize to Master Caleb right now and get this eyesore out of here. The shove sent me stumbling into the wooden railing. The pendant on my chest suddenly became scorching hot. A powerful surge of anger rushed through our connection. It wasn't my anger. It was the pendant's. Just then, Caleb seemed to lose his patience. He snorted. A nuisance. He raised his hand. A wisp of crimson flame, radiating a dangerous aura, coalesced at his fingertip. He was going to burn Old Gray. No. My vision tunneled. Without thinking, I threw myself forward, trying to block the flame. But how could my speed compare to an adept's? Just as the flame was about to land on Old Gray, at the very last second, time seemed to freeze. The dancing flame hovered in midair, motionless. Caleb's arrogant expression, Manager Miller's fearful, sycophantic grin, they were all frozen in place. Even the dust motes floating in the air were still. An indescribable, chilling aura, as if from the highest heavens, instantly enveloped the stall. I remained in my forward lunge, stiffly turning my head. At the entrance to the stall, a figure had appeared. Moon-white robe, hair tied with a jade pin. Lord Caspian. He stood there quietly, his expression aloof. His pale eyes glanced at the frozen flame, at Caleb, at Manager Miller, and finally, landed on my face. His gaze seemed to pause for a fraction of a second on my chest. Then he stepped forward, walking into the stall. As he entered, the frozen space began to flow again. Uft. The suspended flame silently extinguished, leaving not even a wisp of smoke. Oh Lord! Caleb's face went deathly pale. He dropped to his knees with a thud, shaking like a leaf. Manager Miller simply collapsed, too terrified to even speak. Lord Caspian didn't even look at them. He walked directly to Old Gray. Old Gray seemed to sense something. He strained to open his cloudy eyes and looked at the man before him. The Lord raised a finger. A tiny, almost invisible speck of pure white light gathered at his fingertip. He gently touched it to Old Gray's forehead. Old Gray's body visibly relaxed. The pained expression vanished. A look of gentle release appeared in his cloudy eyes. He looked at me one last time, then slowly, peacefully closed his eyes. His breathing stopped. I stared, blankly. Tears welled up and streamed down my face without warning. Lord Caspian withdrew his hand, the white light fading. He turned, his gaze finally falling on Caleb, who was kneeling and trembling. The look was faint, but it made Caleb feel as if he had been plunged into an icy abyss. He shivered even more violently. The third rule of the sect. What is it? The Lord asked, his voice cool, betraying no emotion. Caleb's teeth chattered. F forbids disciples from harming one another. The sixth rule. Cherish all life within the sect, down to every blade of grass. Since you know the rules. Lord Caspian's voice remained flat. Report to the Hall of Judgment and accept your punishment. Yes, yes, my lord. I obey. Caleb kowtowed repeatedly as if he'd been granted a pardon, then scrambled away, not even daring to look back. Manager Miller tried to sneak away. You. The Lord's gaze fell on him. Miller froze, his face ashen. Mistreating a fellow disciple. Dereliction of duty. The position of acolyte manager will be replaced. A single, light sentence sealed Manager Miller's fate. He collapsed to the ground like a pile of sludge. Lord Caspian didn't look at him again. His gaze finally returned to me. My face was still wet with tears as I stared at him, dumbfounded. He looked at me, silent for a few moments. Then he did something that no one could have ever expected. He raised his hand. His long, jade-like fingers reached out, naturally, toward my neck. I instinctively took a step back, watching him warily. His fingers stopped in midair. In those pale eyes, I thought I saw a flash of something incredibly subtle, almost imperceptible. Annoyance. Then he shifted his finger, pointing at my chest. You have something. His voice was still cool. My heart hammered. The umbral casket. He'd found it. I subconsciously clutched my chest, my heart racing. The casket was hidden right against my skin. He'd found it. Was he going to take it? It was a dangerous thing. Maybe it was better if he did. But the pendant seemed to value it so much. My mind was a mess. Lord Caspian's hand remained suspended, pointing at my chest. His expression was calm, as if waiting for me to produce it. My lord, just as I was trying to figure out what to do, the pendant on my chest exploded with a heat more intense than ever before, nearly making me jump. Then an incredibly forceful thought, like a bursting dam, flooded my mind. Not his mine. Get lost. Simple. Brutal. Filled with a ferocious possessiveness and repulsion. The mental barrage made me dizzy, and I nearly lost my balance. At the same time, an invisible, powerful force erupted from me. The force was subtle, yet it carried an inviolable authority, aimed directly at Lord Caspian. Lord Caspian seemed to sense something. His pale pupils contracted ever so slightly. The hand suspended in the air slowly retracted. He looked at me, his expression turning complicated. There was inquiry, scrutiny, and something else I couldn't understand at all, like the displeasure of having been offended. But in the end he said nothing. He just gave me one last, deep look. It felt as if his gaze passed through my body and fell directly on the pendant at my heart. Then he turned. His moon-white figure vanished from the stall entrance as silently as he had appeared. The chilling pressure that had filled the stall dissipated with him. My legs gave out, and I slid to the ground, leaning against the wooden railing, gasping for breath. My back was completely soaked. That momentary, invisible confrontation had been more terrifying than facing Caleb's flames. Old Gray's body lay there, peaceful and serene. Manager Miller was a heap in the corner, his eyes vacant, clearly scared out of his wits. I touched my chest. The pendant's temperature was slowly dropping, but that intense thought, mine, not his, was still echoing in my mind, like a beast guarding its food. I looked down at the umbral casket hidden in my clothes. What in the world was this thing, that it could even draw the attention of the great lord? And the pendant, what was it? Why did it hold such animosity toward Lord Caspian? Manager Miller was indeed replaced. The new manager, a man named Wallace, seemed honest and treated the acolytes decently. Caleb was apparently punished severely by the Hall of Judgment and confined. Even his master didn't dare plead for him. The beast pen seemed to return to normal. But I knew some things had changed. The pendant, after that day, became much more active. It no longer just passively heated up or sent vague feelings. It began to express its desires more clearly. For instance, when I was cleaning and passed the spirit herb garden, it would suddenly heat up, its intent focused intensely on some unremarkable weed with silver-edged leaves. Want. I hesitated. That was the herb garden. Want. The intent was more forceful. I had no choice but to wait until no one was looking, quickly pluck a few stalks, and stuff them in my shirt. Only then did the pendant quiet down. Another time, I was in the back hills dumping dirty water from cleaning the stalls. It suddenly got hot, its intent pointing toward a protruding, black, charcoal-like rock on a distant cliff. Move. I looked at the giant rock, bigger than I was and embedded in the cliff face. I was speechless. I can't move that. The pendant went silent for a moment. Then, A faint but pure stream of power flowed down my arm into my palm. I tentatively pushed against the rock. Miraculously, the massive stone budged, just a fraction. I gritted my teeth, borrowing that power, and with all my might, I pushed and pried. Rumble. The giant rock tumbled off the cliff. Underneath, a small patch of damp earth was revealed. In the soil grew a few small, entirely jade-green plants that glowed with a faint light. The spiritual energy was palpable. Quick. The pendant's thought was urgent. I quickly dug out the plants. The pendant let out a satisfied hum, and the assistance vanished. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted, looking at the spirit-rich plants in my hand. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This pendant was getting more and more demanding. What did it even want with these things? I secretly hid the silver-edged weed and the green plants. That night, I asked the pendant, "Hey, what do you want these plants for? And that black rock?" The pendant ignored me, but after a moment, a thought came through. Eat. Eat. A pendant eats plants? I was floored. You're alive? I asked cautiously. The pendant ignored me again, as if to say duh. The peaceful days were shattered again. This time, they were coming for me. Or rather, for the umbral casket I carried. That day, I had just finished cleaning the stalls, and was heading to get food when two people blocked my path. A man and a woman. The man wore the robes of an inner sect disciple, his face grim, his gaze as sharp as a knife. The woman wore the robes of an outer sect manager. I recognized her. It was the newly promoted manager of the Spirit Herb Garden, a Supervisor Sullivan, known for her harshness. Mia. Supervisor Sullivan squinted at me, sizing me up like a piece of merchandise. Supervisor Sullivan, I said, bowing my head. A bad feeling crept over me. Someone has reported, Supervisor Sullivan's voice was shrill, that you have repeatedly stolen valuable plants from the herb garden. You've got some nerve. My heart sank. I'd been so careful when I took the silver-edged weed. I didn't. I tried to remain calm. Didn't. The grim inner sect disciple next to her sneered. He suddenly raised his hand, and a black light shot toward me. It was too fast. I couldn't dodge. The black light hit my chest. There was no pain, but the silver-edged weed and the green plants I had hidden in my clothes, wrapped in cloth, were pulled out by some force and flew into the disciple's hand. The evidence is right here. Still dare to deny it? Supervisor Sullivan shrieked. Deacon Victor's spirit-seeking technique is never wrong. You, a lowly acolyte, stealing valuable plants. According to sect rules, your powers should be stripped, and you should be exiled from the sect. Stripped of my powers? I didn't have any powers to strip. This was a death sentence. I found those in the back hills. I said urgently. The back hills? Deacon Victor sneered. All spiritual plants in the back hills are under the jurisdiction of the herb garden. Picking them without permission is theft. He juggled the plants in his hand, his eyes greedy. Heartgrass and silver thread. Not bad quality. Quite valuable. Mia, will you admit your crime? Supervisor Sullivan chimed in. Deacon Victor is a disciple of the Hall of Discipline. You were caught red-handed. Mia, get on your knees and confess. Watching them play their parts, I understood. This wasn't about theft. They wanted the plants I had, and were using this as an excuse to rob me. This Deacon Victor was probably the muscle Supervisor Sullivan had brought in. I trembled with anger. I didn't steal anything. I didn't. Stubborn. A cold glint flashed in Victor's eyes. Then don't blame me for being rough. He took a sharp step forward, his body erupting with a powerful aura. The pressure of a foundation adept crashed down on me like a mountain. My chest constricted as if I'd been hit by a boulder. I fell to my knees with a thud, a sweet taste filling my throat. I almost coughed up blood. This was the power of an adept. Before him, I was as insignificant as an ant. Hand it over, Victor snarled. His hand shot out like a hawk's talon, a sharp wind whistling as it flew toward my chest. His target wasn't the herbs. It was the umbral casket. He'd sensed it. I understood in an instant. Supervisor Sullivan was just a cover. This Deacon Victor was after the umbral casket from the start. He wanted to steal it. I clutched my chest tightly. No. I couldn't give it to him. The pendant had said it was his. Just as Victor's hand was about to touch my chest, vmm, a hum that seemed to originate from the depths of my soul. The pendant at my chest erupted in a blinding light, as brilliant as the sun. The light instantly enveloped me. Victor's hand grabbed the light, and was met with the touch of searing hot iron. Arg! He let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire hand instantly turned black and started smoking. A terrifying, indescribable pressure, as vast as the ancient cosmos, like a primordial beast awakening, exploded from me. Boom! The ground of the entire beast pens shook. The animals in the stalls shrieked in terror. Victor and Supervisor Sullivan were slammed by an invisible hammer. Splat! Splat! Both of them spewed blood, their bodies flying like broken sandbags, crashing into the ground dozens of feet away in a cloud of dust. Victor's blackened hand was twisted at an unnatural angle. He stared at me in terror, as if he had seen a ghost. He tried to scramble up but coughed up more blood and passed out. Supervisor Sullivan was already lying motionless, blood pouring from her mouth and nose, unconscious. The light slowly receded. The world-destroying pressure vanished. I stood there unharmed. But the pendant on my chest was terrifyingly hot. The thought it sent was filled with violence and irritation. So noisy. Get lost. Things had escalated. A deacon from the Hall of Discipline and a manager from the herb garden, severely injured in the beast pens, by an acolyte. The news spread like wildfire, instantly flying through the outer sect, and even alarming the inner sect. As the person involved, I was invited to the Hall of Discipline by several wary disciples. It was less of an invitation and more of an escort. The way they looked at me was filled with fear and disbelief. The Hall of Discipline was tense. Several elders with deep auras sat at the head of the hall. Victor and Supervisor Sullivan were carried in, their faces pale, their injuries severe. Victor's entire arm was ruined. Mia, a cold-faced elder barked. Do you admit your guilt? I knelt on the cold floor, my head bowed. Disciple does not know her crime. Insolence. Another elder slammed his hand on the armrest. The witnesses and evidence are all here. Victor and Sullivan both testify that you first stole spiritual plants, then used a dark art to severely injure them. And you still won't confess? I did not steal, I said, lifting my head, trying to keep my voice steady. I found those herbs by a cliff in the back hills. As for them, I looked at the unconscious pair, the terrifying scene replaying in my mind. A shiver ran down my spine. I don't know what happened. Deacon Victor tried to search me, and then this happened. Nonsense. The cold-faced elder didn't believe a word. You, an acolyte with no powers, could injure a Foundation adept like Victor? You must have used some sinister magical artifact. Speak. What was it? His gaze was sharp as a knife, piercing toward my chest. He was after the umbral casket again. Or the pendant. I clenched my fists. Just then. She isn't lying. A voice, cool and clear as a jade bell, sounded without warning at the hall's entrance. The temperature in the entire hall seemed to drop. Everyone's expression changed. They all turned to look at the entrance. Lord Caspian stood there, having arrived unnoticed. Moon-white robes spotless. He walked slowly into the hall. All the elders, including the stern-faced one, hastily stood and bowed. We greet the great lord. Lord Caspian walked directly to the main seat at the head of the hall and sat down. His gaze swept calmly over the people in the hall, finally landing on me. It lingered for only a moment before moving on. Victor, he began, his voice not loud, but it reached every ear clearly. He carries a soul eater's charm. He abused his power, coveted a fellow disciple's belongings, and when his attempt to steal it failed, he suffered the backlash. Soul eater's charm? The elders' faces paled. That was an infamous dark artifact, despised by all righteous sects. Sullivan. She knew of his actions but did not report them, and aided him. The Lord's tone held no inflection, as if stating trivial facts. These too are corrupt. They have violated the sect's rules. They have only themselves to blame. He looked at the cold-faced elder. Elder Zhou, the Hall of Discipline, needs to be cleaned out. Cold sweat beaded on Elder Zhou's forehead. He bowed deeply. Yes, yes. You are wise, my lord. I was negligent. I will see to their punishment immediately. Lord Caspian said no more. The hall fell silent. No one dared to question his judgment. The fates of Victor and Sullivan were sealed. As for you, the Lord's gaze finally returned to me. My heart leaped into my throat. To possess a great treasure is to invite disaster. He looked at me, his pale eyes deep and unreadable. Be careful. With that he rose. His figure flickered and vanished from the hall, as if he had never been there. He left behind a hall full of silent elders and me, my frayed nerves just beginning to settle. He had helped me again. Though he said I possessed a great treasure, he didn't press the issue. He didn't try to take it. He even got me out of trouble. I touched the pendant at my chest. It was quiet, giving no reaction at all. Victor and Sullivan had their powers stripped and were cast out of the sect. I heard that by the time they were thrown down the mountain, they were in worse shape than beggars. The beast pens got a new manager, a kind, honest man named Wallace. No one dared to bother me anymore. Even the gossiping acolytes gave me a wide berth. I went back to shoveling beast dung. But in my heart, heavy questions remained. The umbral casket. The soul eater's charm. Victor. What were they really after? Lord Caspian. How much did he know? Why did he help me? And this pendant of mine, what was it? Why did the Lord seem to know it? And why did it hate him so much? I couldn't figure it out. Life returned to a semblance of peace. The pendant still ordered me around. Today, it wanted me to fetch a pebble from a certain pool in the back hills. Tomorrow, it made me collect morning dew. The day after, it had me use the dew to water the stub of silver-edged weed I had tossed into a broken pot on my windowsill. I felt like a peasant being exploited by a landlord. Ancestor, what are you even trying to do? I complained to the pendant. It ignored me, sending back a two-word thought. Nurture. It. Nurture it? Nurture the plant? Or the rock? Resigned, I followed its orders. In the broken pot on the windowsill, that stump of silver-edged weed, watered with morning dew, actually sprouted tender green shoots. It was full of life. The trouble started with a disturbance in the Sect's forbidden zone in the back hills. They said an ancient, abandoned seal had weakened, leaking out a trace of incredibly pure but violent demonic energy. Though the elders quickly reinforced the seal, the whole sect was on edge for a while. Demonic energy was a taboo in the world of adepts. Not long after the incident with the seal, one night, as I was sleeping in my bunk, the pendant on my chest started vibrating violently. It was searing hot. A wave of unprecedented thought, filled with extreme panic and fury, slammed into my mind like a tsunami. Wake up. Now. Danger. I jolted awake. In the darkness, a cold, viscous, malevolent aura, like an invisible tide, was silently seeping into the room. The feeling was very similar to the malevolence from the umbral casket, but far larger, far more terrifying. It was as if countless tormented souls were wailing in my ears. The other acolytes in the room were frowning in their sleep, but they couldn't wake up. The pendant was so hot it was burning my chest. Its thought was frantic. Run. Get out of here. To the back hills. To that pit. That pit. The abandoned training ground where I found the umbral casket? Quickly. The thought was a command. I gritted my teeth, threw off my quilt, and crept out of bed. The cold aura seemed to notice my movement and surged toward me. The pendant erupted in a brilliant white light, forming a thin shield around me. HSSSD. The cold aura crashed against the shield, making a corrosive sound. The shield flickered violently. The pendant's thought was strained. Hold on. Go. I bolted out the door. Just as I rushed outside, I heard several blood-curdling screams pierce the night. Then came the sound of exploding spells and horrified shouts. Demonic energy. The demonic energy is corrupting people. A disciple has been possessed. Alert! The entire sect is under attack. The outer sect instantly descended into chaos. In the shadows, figures of disciples corrupted by the demonic energy, their eyes glowing red, pounced on those around them like wild animals. Screams, clashes, and cries filled the air. It was like hell on earth. I was terrified. The pendant's shield was growing dimmer under the assault of the thick demonic energy. Run. The pendant's thought was weaker, but still forceful. I ran for my life toward the back hills. On the way, I saw several corrupted acolytes roar and leap at me. The pendant's light flared, and a weak force knocked them back. But more dark figures swarmed from all sides. The shield flickered. The pendant's heat was fading fast. It was about to fail. Just as I was about to despair, swoosh! A cool, moon-white figure, like a meteor streaking through the darkness, appeared before me. Lord Caspian. He hovered in the air, his body radiating a soft yet immense white brilliance. Wherever the light touched, the thick, viscous demonic energy dissolved like snow in the sun, hissing as it rapidly retreated. The corrupted acolytes rushing me were caught in the light. Black smoke rose from their bodies, and they fell to the ground, screaming and convulsing. The chaotic scene was instantly cleared. His gaze swept over the devastated outer sect, his brow furrowed slightly. Then his eyes fell on me. When he saw the thin, flickering white shield around my body, a very complex emotion seemed to cross his pale eyes. There was surprise, understanding, and a flicker of I knew it. He didn't speak. He raised a hand, and a pure white light shot toward me. I thought he was going to attack the pendant's shield, but the light gently merged with my flickering barrier. The shield, on the verge of shattering, instantly stabilized, its light even growing a bit brighter. The pendant seemed to humph. The thought it sent was meddler, but it didn't reject the power. Lord Caspian didn't look at me again. His gaze turned toward the deepest part of the back hills, where the demonic energy was thickest. The source is deep within the forbidden zone. His cool voice echoed across the chaotic outer sect. All disciples form defensive formations. Elders, follow me. We will suppress the source. With that, his figure became a streak of light, rocketing toward the forbidden zone. From the direction of the inner sect, several other powerful auras rose and followed him. With Lord Caspian's intervention and orders, the outer sect began to stabilize. The surviving elders and managers started organizing the disciples into defensive circles. I used the chaos and the protection of the pendant's shield to keep running toward the abandoned training ground in the back hills. That was where the pit I'd found the umbral casket was. That was the pendant's destination. I stumbled into the abandoned training ground. It was far from the main conflict, so the demonic energy was thinner, but the cold malevolence still hung in the air. The pendant's shield was very dim. Down. Inside. The thought was urgent. I found the collapsed entrance to the pit, hidden by weeds. I tore them aside and jumped in without hesitation. Thump. I landed on the familiar, damp, cold earth. The pit was pitch black, lit only by the faint white glow of the pendant on my chest. Release. The pendant's thought pointed to my chest. Release what? I was confused. The casket. The umbral casket. The thought was impatient. I quickly pulled the black iron box from my clothes. Now what? Open. The thought was a command. I can't open it, I said frantically. I tried last time. It sealed shut. Your blood. Quickly. The thought was practically a roar. There's no time. They're fighting above. This place will be discovered soon. Blood? I didn't have time to think. I bit my fingertip, squeezed out a drop of blood, and let it fall onto the umbral casket. Vim. As soon as the blood touched it, the dim patterns on the casket's surface glowed with a faint red light. Click. With a soft sound, the tightly sealed box popped open a crack. A wave of even purer, but also more violent and chaotic demonic energy, instantly erupted from the crack. The temperature in the pit plunged. Countless piercing shrieks seemed to tear at my eardrums. Ah! The terrifying demonic energy slammed into me, my vision going black, my head splitting. The pendant's light flickered violently, desperately protecting me. Its thought was frantic. Quickly. Reach in. Take out what's inside. Take it out. The source of this terrifying energy? I stared at the crack in horror. Hurry. Trust me. The pendant's thought was more urgent than ever, carrying a hint of a plea. I closed my eyes. Gritting my teeth, I shoved my hand into the crack that was spewing horrific demonic energy. My fingers touched something cold and hard. I grabbed it and yanked it out. The moment I pulled it from the umbral casket, rumble. The entire pit, no, the entire world, shook violently. It was as if something had been completely awakened. Dirt rained down from the ceiling. From the direction of the forbidden zone, a deafening roar, filled with pain and fury, echoed. It was the sound of a demon, 10 times more terrifying than before. At the same time, swish, swish, swish. Several powerful auras instantly locked onto this pit. The source of the demonic energy is here. Something has been released. It was the voices of the sect elders. They'd been alerted. No. The pendant's thought was panicked. They found us. Quick. Press it to your heart. Quick. I looked down at the object in my hand. It was a piece of bone, about the length of a finger. It was black as ink with a dark, cold luster. It was covered in dense, twisted, eerie crimson patterns. An indescribable aura of evil, chaos, and ancientness emanated from this tiny piece of bone. Just holding it, I felt my soul tremble, as if it would be consumed by the chaotic will within. Now, the pendant was practically screaming in my mind. Outside, the powerful auras were closing in fast. I could even hear the sound of them cutting through the air. It was life or death. I gritted my teeth and slammed the piece of terrifying, demonic black bone against my chest, right where the pendant was. The instant the bone touched my skin and the pendant, VMMMMM. The pendant exploded with a dazzling light, a billion times brighter than the sun. The light wasn't pure white anymore. It was a primordial color, encompassing all things, the color of chaos at the dawn of time. An indescribable will, vast, ancient, imperious, as if it stood above all creation, descended with a crash. At the same time, the crimson on the black bone writhed madly, emitting sharp, piercing shrieks. The violent demonic energy surged toward the pendant like a bursting dam, trying to corrupt and consume it. Humph! A cold, imperious snort, filled with absolute authority, like the voice of heaven itself, thundered in my mind. It was the pendant. But it was no longer a vague thought. It was a clear, commanding male voice. A mere remnant of a soul dares to act so presumptuously? Be suppressed. As he spoke the word suppressed, the chaotic light from the pendant instantly enveloped the bone and the gushing demonic energy. It was like a furnace refining stubborn iron. HSSSSSD. A piercing sound filled the pit. The bone trembled violently, letting out an unwilling wail. The demonic patterns flickered frantically, struggling. But wrapped in the chaotic light, its struggles grew weaker and weaker. The demonic energy was forcibly stripped away, purified. The black bone's color visibly lightened, from ink black to dark gray, to pale gray. Finally, when all the demonic patterns had vanished and all the demonic energy had been purged, the bone fragment transformed into a piece of warm, jade-like bone, radiating a soft, pure white light. The instant the bone was completely purified, boom. From the direction of the forbidden zone, the terrifying demon's roar turned into a final, desperate shriek. And then it stopped. The earth-shaking tremors ceased. A powerful, chilling presence, like the might of heaven, instantly enveloped the pit. Lord Caspian's figure appeared at the entrance. He floated down, landing in the pit. His moon-white robes shimmered with a strange light under the glow of the chaos. His gaze fell immediately on me. Or rather, on my chest. On the pendant that was erupting with chaotic light. At that moment, the pendant's light was slowly receding. The purified, jade-like piece of bone, wrapped in the chaotic light, was slowly merging into the pendant. The pendant's form was also changing within the light. It became more perfectly round, its luster turning inward. Incredibly profound patterns, as if containing the great truths of the universe, appeared on its surface. An even deeper, vaster aura emanated from it. Lord Caspian watched quietly, his face showing no surprise. As if he had expected this all along. When the last ray of chaotic light had been absorbed into the pendant, and the piece of bone had completely vanished, the pendant returned to a calm state, resting warmly against my chest. But the aura it gave off was completely different from before. The pit was dead silent, except for the sound of my own frantic heartbeat. Lord Caspian's gaze finally moved from the pendant to my face. His expression was complex. There was relief, inquiry, scrutiny. And finally, it softened into a barely audible sigh. He looked at me and spoke slowly. His voice was still cool, but it seemed to hold a trace of warmth. Now you should know. He is not an amulet. He is Zane. Zane. The pendant's name. I looked down at the warm pendant on my chest. It was quiet, but I knew it was different. That imperious voice, that was him. Zane, I murmured. The pendant seemed to move, ever so slightly, as if in response. The demonic source in the back hills was completely suppressed by the combined efforts of Lord Caspian and the elders. The purified bone fragment was a core piece of a powerful ancient demon, sealed in the umbral casket. For some reason, it had ended up in the abandoned training ground, where I found it. Victor's Soul Eater's charm had sensed the aura of this demon bone, which was why he had coveted it. The weakening of the seal in the Forbidden Zone had leaked demonic energy that resonated with the bone fragment, triggering the subsequent demonic corruption. And Zane, he needed this demon bone fragment. Not for its demonic energy, but for the primordial chaos matter it contained. It was the key to his recovery. Lord Caspian seemed to know all of this. He didn't explain much, only telling me that Zane was no ordinary object. He was a great being from the ancient era, one who shared his origin with the universe itself. Before he completely faded, he sealed his last shred of consciousness and power into a piece of chaos jade, and fell into an eternal slumber. By chance, it ended up in the mortal world. And I found it. And my blood accidentally woke him. He needed immense time and special energy to slowly recover. The demon bone fragment from the umbral casket contained a trace of that primordial chaos, which was exactly the nourishment he desperately needed. As for him and Lord Caspian, the Lord only said coolly, an old acquaintance. Zane's thought was a bit grumpy. We fought. Later, from the hushed, reverent tones of the other elders, I pieced together a little more. Lord Caspian, whose adept title was Caspian, his real name also seemed to be Caspian. And Zane, in the ancient legends, was a taboo existence who once challenged the heavens and caused the fall of gods, Emperor Zane. As for what kind of history they had, I didn't dare to ask, and I wouldn't have understood anyway. I couldn't stay at the beast pens anymore. In fact, I couldn't stay in the outer sect at all. Although Lord Caspian and the elders had issued a gag order, forbidding anyone from discussing what happened that night, the name Mia had become a whispered taboo in the Azure Spire. An acolyte who could grievously injure a deacon from the Hall of Discipline, who could make the Great Lord himself appear, and who could walk away from a demonic invasion unscathed, was not normal. The new manager of the Beast Pens, Mr. Wallace, started shaking whenever he saw me. The other acolytes avoided me like the plague. I knew it was time for me to leave. The Azure Spire was not my home. I packed my few meager belongings, a couple of changes of ragged clothes, a few pieces of dried rations I had saved, and stood at the door of the acolyte hut I had lived in for 3 years. I felt a little lost. The world was vast. Where could I go? Back to the village? The place where they called me a jinx? The pendant at my chest, oh, now I knew his name was Zane, was warm. A thought came through, concise and to the point. Leave. Where to? I asked. Just follow your gut. The thought was lazy, like a well-fed cat. I sighed. Fine. You're the boss. You call the shots. I took one last look at the cloud-shrouded gates of the Azure Spire, then turned and walked down the mountain path. Not far down the road, a moon-white figure stood silently under an ancient pine tree. The mountain wind stirred his robes, making him look like an ethereal immortal. Lord Caspian. He looked at me, his expression calm. I stopped, a little nervous. My lord. He nodded slightly. You are leaving the Azure Spire. Where do you plan to go? I shook my head. I don't know. He was silent for a moment. Zane needs primordial chaos to recover. It is exceedingly rare, mostly found in ancient ruins or treacherous lands. He looked at me, his tone flat. You have no powers. The road ahead will be perilous. I pressed my lips together. I know, but staying here is harder. Thank you for your advice, my lord, I said in a low voice. Lord Caspian said no more. He raised a hand, and a streak of light flew toward me. I caught it instinctively. It was a token, not gold or jade, cool to the touch. The character for Cloud was elegantly carved on its face. This token will allow you to withdraw money or seek shelter from any Cloud Spire emporium in the mortal world, he said coolly. Consider it a gesture to an old friend. An old friend? He meant Zane. I clutched the token, my feelings complex. Thank you, my lord. Lord Caspian's gaze seemed to linger for a moment on my chest. Then he turned. His figure transformed into a streak of clear light and vanished into the clouds. I gripped the token, took a deep breath, and continued down the mountain. From my chest, Zane's thought drifted up lazily. Guess the kid still has some conscience. Using the token Lord Caspian gave me, I went to the nearest major city, Brinkwater, and withdrew a considerable sum of money from the Cloudspire Emporium. It was enough to live comfortably in the mortal world for the rest of my life. But I had no intention of stopping. Zane needed primordial chaos. Although he didn't push me, I knew he needed to recover. And besides, I wanted to see the world. I bought a gentle chestnut-colored horse, packed a simple bag, and began my journey. Zane truly became my amulet. He still ordered me around. Left. 300 miles. There's something. Stop. Dig in the valley below. That black mountain up ahead. Climb it. The places he pointed to were often remote and dangerous. Miasma-filled swamps, forests crawling with poisonous insects, windswept snowy peaks, bottomless underground rivers. I escaped death countless times. I was bitten by venomous snakes, fell off cliffs, got lost in the desert, and was nearly swallowed by quicksand. Every time, I was saved by a last-minute burst of power from Zane. The things he had me find were also bizarre. A scorched black rock buried in volcanic ash. A small blue plant growing inside a 10,000-year-old block of ice. A single drop of foul-smelling black liquid suspended from the ceiling of an ancient tomb. Without exception, these things all contained a tiny, faint wisp of chaotic energy. After Zane absorbed them, the jade pendant's form became more solid, and the patterns on its surface grew clearer and more profound. Occasionally, the voice of his thoughts became clearer and more human. No longer just simple commands. There was impatience. Faster. What are you dawdling for? There was disgust. This place is filthy. And once, when I was almost mauled by a ferocious beast, there was explosive rage. Wretch. You seek oblivion. Then the beast mysteriously burst into flames and turned to ash. I discovered that the legendary Emperor Zane had a bit of a temper. And he was very lazy. He would never lift a finger if he didn't have to. If he could make me do the legwork, he absolutely would. A true amulet. 3 years later, I arrived at a desolate place known as the Withered Sea. It was a vast desert of yellow sand, perpetually scorching hot. Legend said that not even nascent masters dared to venture deep into it. The place Zane was pointing to was in the very heart of the desert. What is it this time? I asked, wrapped in a thick scarf, with only my eyes exposed. I looked out at the endless expanse of gold, feeling like my mouth was full of sand. Something good. Zane's thought carried a rare hint of excitement. Much better than that drop of nether spring dew last time. Much better. Fine, I said, resigned. I urged my horse, whom I'd named Red, into the sea of sand. We walked for 7 days and 7 nights. My rations were almost gone, and my water was running low. Red was panting heavily. The place Zane was pointing to still seemed impossibly far away. How much longer? I asked, my voice hoarse from heat and thirst. Soon, Zane said evasively. You said soon 3 days ago. This time it's really soon. I rolled my eyes, as if I'd believe him. Suddenly, Red whinnied in terror, stamping his feet anxiously, refusing to go any further. What is it? I asked, cautiously scanning our surroundings. The wind whipped up the sand, obscuring the sky. The pendant on my chest suddenly became scorching hot. Zane's thought was heavy. Careful. Something's coming. The words had barely formed in my mind when the sand dune a few hundred yards ahead began to bulge as if it were boiling. Rumble. The sand exploded, and a colossal creature burst from beneath the desert. It was a monstrous worm, its body as massive as a mountain range, covered in dark gold metallic armor. Countless giant legs supported its frame. Its head was just a terrifying maw, dozens of feet in diameter, filled with spiraling teeth. It radiated an ancient, savage, and violent aura, stirring up the sandstorm and blotting out the sun. A dune tyrant. I was petrified. This was the ruler of the Withered Sea, A terrifying creature said to feast on dragons. Red collapsed to the ground, foaming at the mouth. The dune tyrant seemed to have noticed us, 2 tiny morsels. Its massive maw opened and closed, letting out a roar like muffled thunder. A terrifying suction pulled at us. The sand beneath our feet collapsed, and Red and I were pulled uncontrollably toward that abyssal mouth. Zane. Help! I shrieked. Troublesome. Zane's voice was thick with annoyance. The pendant erupted in chaotic light. A powerful force was about to burst forth. But just at that critical moment, Zing! A clear sword cry, like a dragon's roar, echoed across the desert. A glorious, sun-bright, and utterly pure beam of white sword light tore through the swirling sand. Like a divine punishment, it struck the dune tyrant's hideous mouth with perfect precision. Squelch! The dark gold armor was sliced open like paper. Stinking green blood gushed out like a waterfall. Roar! The dune tyrant let out a world-shaking, agonized howl. Its massive body writhed madly, churning the sea of sand. The sword light faded. A cold, solitary figure hovered silently in front of the giant worm's head. His moon-white robe whipped in the sandstorm, yet remained spotless. Lord Caspian. He held a long sword that was as flawless as jade, its tip angled downward. He looked indifferently at the writhing monster. Wretch! How dare you harm them? The dune tyrant seemed completely enraged. Its massive body arched, and its countless legs, like giant spears, shot toward the tiny figure in the air, whistling as they tore through space. Lord Caspian's eyes grew colder. He flicked his sword casually. Swish! A beam of sword light, more condensed and colder than before, like cascading moonlight, flowed out silently. The terrifying legs, raining down from all directions, all snapped cleanly a few feet from his body. The cuts were as smooth as a mirror. The dune tyrant's screams grew even more shrill. It seemed to finally realize the terror of the man before it. Its massive body suddenly dove into the sand, trying to flee. Humph! Lord Caspian let out a cold snort. The long sword left his hand, transforming into a rainbow of white light that shot into the sand like a living thing. Boom! A muffled explosion sounded from deep within the earth. The entire desert rippled violently. A moment later, the white rainbow burst from the sand and flew back into Lord Caspian's hand. The blade was as clean as new. The desert below fell silent. A thick, dark gold blood slowly seeped up from the sand, staining a large area. The ruler of the withered sea, the dune tyrant, was dead. Lord Caspian floated down and landed in front of me. The wind whipped his robes and my scarf. I stared at him, still in shock. My lord, how did you get here? His gaze swept over my disheveled state, then to my unconscious horse. Passing by, his voice was as cool as ever. From my chest, Zane's thought scoffed. Liar. Lord Caspian's gaze seemed to pierce through my clothes and land on the pendant. He ignored Zane's thought and looked toward the spot where the dune tyrant's blood was seeping. Deep in the dune tyrant's lair is the earthen core it has condensed over 10,000 years. It contains a trace of primordial earth essence. It will be useful to Zane. After he spoke, he raised a hand and made a grasping motion at the sand. Vmm. A fist-sized, earthy yellow crystal, radiating a heavy, immense power, burst from the sand and flew into his hand. He tossed the crystal to me. Take it. I caught it instinctively. It was heavy and warm. From my chest, Zane's thought flickered. Good stuff. Lord Caspian didn't look at me again. He turned, seeming to prepare to leave. My lord, I called out. He paused, without turning back. Have you been following me all this time? I asked, mustering my courage. These past 3 years I had faced death countless times. On several occasions, at my most desperate moments, I thought I had felt a faint, cool presence nearby. I had always dismissed it as my imagination. But this time, Lord Caspian was silent for a moment. His cool voice was slightly muffled by the wind. I'm keeping a promise to a friend. With that, his figure flickered and vanished. Keeping a promise? A promise to who? Zane. I looked down at the pendant on my chest. Zane's thought was a bit awkward. Meddler. I smiled. I clutched the warm, heavy earthen core in my hand. Thank you, I said. I didn't know if I was talking to the vanished lord, or to the amulet on my chest. The desert wind didn't seem so hot anymore. After absorbing the earthen core, Zane fell into a deep sleep again. This time, his slumber was longer than ever before. The pendant became warm and subdued, its brilliance completely hidden, like a real, ordinary piece of jade. But I knew he was undergoing a critical transformation. I didn't stop. Following the last direction Zane had given me before he fell asleep, I continued my journey to the far west of the continent, to a forbidden sea known as the Void Sea. Legend said it was the end of the world, a place where all things went to die. I rode my recovered horse, Red, through mountains and across rivers. Without Zane's guidance and protection, the journey was much harder. But I was no longer the little acolyte who shoveled dung in the beast pens, bullied by everyone. 3 years of life and death trials, my body repeatedly washed by Zane's power. Although I still had no aptitude for formal adept arts, my body had been subtly transformed. I was much stronger, quicker, and my senses were incredibly sharp. My intuition for danger was far beyond that of a normal person. More importantly, I had learned to be independent. I had learned to survive in the most desperate situations. A year later, I finally reached the westernmost edge of the continent. Before me was a boundless, dead gray ocean. The Void Sea. The water was thick as slurry, without a single ripple, utterly silent. The sky was covered in a perpetual gray mist, so oppressive it felt hard to breathe. The shore was barren, with only jagged black reefs. The air was filled with an aura of decay, of the end of all things. Red pawed the ground uneasily, refusing to go any closer to the shore. I soothed him, gazing at the dead sea. Zane's final destination was somewhere in the depths of the Void Sea. But here even a boat couldn't float. How was I supposed to get there? As I stood there, stumped vmm, the pendant on my chest, which had been silent for over a year, suddenly vibrated gently. A weak but clear thought reached me. It's here. Here? What's here? I looked out at the sea in confusion. In the far distance, on the dead gray surface, something seemed to be moving. Slowly it drew closer. It was a boat. An ancient wooden boat. Its hull was mottled and scarred with age. It was a primitive design with no sails or oars. It just glided silently, smoothly, through the viscous gray water, heading for the shore. Its speed wasn't fast, but it moved with an indescribable rhythm. Finally, the boat silently docked beside the reef in front of me. On the bow stood a figure. He wore a straw cloak and a wide-brimmed hat, his body hunched. I couldn't see his face. All I could see were two ancient, world-weary eyes under the brim of the hat, looking at me. Crossing, a hoarse, dry voice asked. I clutched the pendant on my chest. Zane's thought was calm. Get on. I looked at the strange boat and the mysterious ferryman. I took a deep breath. Crossing. I untied Red's reins and patted his neck. Red, you're free. Go back. Red nuzzled my hand and whinnied, reluctant to leave. But he turned and galloped back the way we came. I turned and stepped onto the ancient, mottled boat. The boat swayed slightly. The ferryman made no extra movements. The boat silently turned and began gliding toward the dead depths of the Void Sea. The viscous water parted on either side of the hull without a sound. Gray mist shrouded everything. Only a dim yellow lamp on the bow cast a faint light. I stood at the stern, watching the shore recede, until it vanished into the gray mist. At my chest, the pendant was warm. Zane's thought carried a subtle hint of anticipation. Almost there. I don't know how long we sailed through the gray mist. Time seemed to lose all meaning here. Finally, the mist ahead seemed to thin. I could faintly see land? No. When the boat finally sailed out of the mist, the sight before me was so staggering I couldn't speak. There was no land. Before me was an indescribable, chaotic void. Countless star fragments, shattered worlds, and broken galaxies, as if crushed by an invisible giant hand and tossed aside, floated in this void, slowly turning. Ribbons of light, colorful yet fragmented, flowed silently through the void. Giant, incomprehensible skeletons, as large as mountain ranges, lay suspended. Further away, a massive black hole slowly spun, devouring everything, while nebulae erupted with destructive energy. This was the wreckage of worlds, the graveyard of all things, and the source of chaos. The boat came to a quiet stop at the edge of this chaotic void. The ferryman's hoarse voice sounded. The eye of the void. We have arrived. He pointed to the deepest part of the chaotic void. There a massive, slowly rotating gray sphere hung in space. On its surface were the projections of countless shattered stars and continents. Countless streams of chaotic energy swirled around it like tentacles. An indescribable aura, as if from the dawn of creation, the primordial source of chaos, emanated from the gray sphere. The Zane pendant on my chest began to vibrate violently. It was hotter than ever before. A vast, excited will, like a wanderer returning home, awakened with a crash. Finally home. Zane's voice was no longer a thought. It rang directly in my mind. Clear, deep, filled with absolute authority, yet tinged with an almost imperceptible weariness and ancient sorrow. Vmm. The pendant erupted in an unprecedented chaotic light. From the light, a phantom figure slowly coalesced. It was the figure of a man. Tall, majestic, dressed in black imperial robes embroidered with the sun, moon, stars, and scenes of creation. His black hair cascaded down his back. His face was a blur, shrouded in chaotic energy. Only his eyes were visible, deep as the ancient cosmos. With every blink, it seemed universes were born and died, galaxies spun. Fust. Ancient. Imperious. The mere presence of this phantom figure made the entire chaotic void tremble. The ferryman was already prostrate on the deck, trembling respectfully. Zane's phantom stood at the bow, his gaze piercing the void, falling on the giant gray sphere, the eye of the void. Mia. His deep, authoritative voice called to me. I looked at his magnificent back, my heart surging. Zane, this is my homeland. The pool of primordial chaos, he said slowly. I must return to my source and reforge my body. The process will be long and dangerous. He turned. Those eyes that seemed to contain all of creation looked at me. His gaze seemed to pass through my body and see into the depths of my soul. Are you willing to wait here for me? His voice was still imperious, but I thought I heard a hint of a question. I looked at his phantom figure, then at this silent, magnificent graveyard of chaos. Wait. How long? 10 years? 100? 1,000? Or maybe forever? But I didn't hesitate. I nodded. Yes. Zane's phantom seemed to nod slightly. Good. He said no more. The phantom became a vast river of chaotic energy, a returning dragon, roaring toward the giant eye of the void in the depths of space. Boom. The chaotic river slammed into the gray sphere. The entire eye of the void shook violently. Countless streams of chaos energy surged wildly. The shattered stars spun faster. An even more ancient, more primordial aura began to emanate from the eye of the void. It was as if a being that had slept for eons was slowly awakening. I stood on the ancient boat, watching this creation-level spectacle. At my chest, the pendant was still warm, but inside it was empty. I knew. My amulet had gone home. I lived on the boat. The ferryman gave me a gray pearl. If I held it in my mouth, I wouldn't need to eat or drink, as if in a state of suspended animation. Time lost all meaning. I sat on the bow, watching the chaotic void, watching the eye of the void change day by day after Zane's return. It spun slower and slower. Its volume seemed to be gradually shrinking. The shattered projections on its surface grew fewer. The chaotic energy became more condensed. Its color, too, slowly shifted from a dead gray to a warm, subdued, primordial obsidian. Occasionally, when the tides of void energy surged, I could faintly feel a familiar, vast will pulsing slowly within the eye of the void. It was Zane. He was transforming. He was reviving. And so, on the silent shore of the void, I waited. Sometimes I would think of my days shoveling dung at the azure spire. I'd think of old gray. I'd think of that cool, moon-like figure of the Lord. Most of the time, I just emptied my mind. I watched the star fragments drift. I watched the chaotic energy flow like dragons. I don't know how much time passed. A year? 10? 100? The giant obsidian sphere finally stopped spinning. It hung silently in the center of the void, radiating a warm, vast chaotic light, like an egg gestating a universe. Then crack, crack. A faint cracking sound echoed in the silent void. On the surface of the obsidian sphere, fine cracks began to appear. More and more cracks, denser and denser. Light shone from within, brighter and brighter. Boom. The entire sphere shattered. Endless light illuminated the entire chaotic void. At the core of the light, a figure solidified, slowly taking form. Black imperial robes, whipping in an unseen wind. Ink-black hair, flowing without a breeze. His face was still shrouded in chaotic energy, impossible to see clearly. Only a pair of eyes, deep as the ancient cosmos, imperious as a heavenly emperor, slowly opened. Wherever his gaze fell, the shattered stars froze. The raging chaos fell silent. He, Emperor Zane, had truly returned. He stepped on the river of chaos. With a single stride, he appeared before the boat. His vast imperial presence made the prostrate ferryman tremble, like a leaf in a storm. Zane's gaze fell on me. His gaze was no longer a phantom. It was real, tangible. It held scrutiny, inquiry, and an indescribable complexity. I stood on the bow, looking up at him. He was too tall, his aura too vast. Like a mortal gazing at the heavens. I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. Zane. Or Emperor? He looked at me silently for a moment. Then, to my astonishment, the vast imperial presence around him receded like a tide. The light of his black robes dimmed. His magnificent form began to shrink, to fade. Finally, all the light vanished. In his place stood a man in a simple black shirt. He was tall and handsome, with sharp brows and starry eyes, a high-bridged nose, and thin lips pressed into a line. Only his eyes remained deep as an abyss, holding the vicissitudes of eons and a trace of lingering imperial authority. He looked like a mortal nobleman with a unique air about him. He stepped onto the boat. The hull swayed slightly. He walked up to me very close. So close I could smell the fresh, ancient scent on him, like a newborn universe. He looked down at me. I looked back at him, a bit stunned. This was still the amulet who worked me to the bone? He suddenly raised his hand. His fingers were long and well-defined. Before I could react, his fingertip gently touched the space between my eyebrows. A warm point of chaotic light entered my mind. Boom. A flood of information poured in. An understanding of the primordial chaos, fragments of universal laws, insights into the use of power. It was vast, profound, and obscure, yet it felt as if I had always known it. My body, under the wash of this power, underwent a heaven and earth-shattering change. My blocked meridians were forced open. My dormant core was like a new universe being born. A feeling of being one with this chaotic void, as if I were a part of the chaos itself, washed over me. I could see the energy flowing in the void. I could hear the rhythm of the floating star fragments. I subconsciously raised my hand. A wisp of chaotic energy, like a docile little snake, wrapped around my finger. Zane withdrew his hand. This is the embryonic form of a chaos body. He spoke. His voice was deep and pleasant. No longer a thought, not the imperious emperor's tone, but a real magnetic male voice. Though you have no adept's aptitude, you can command the chaos. He looked at the wisp of energy around my finger, seeming satisfied. Then he did something that left me completely dumbfounded. He held out his hand, palm up. With a flash of light, a warm jade pendant appeared in his palm. It was the one I had found. But now, it was more perfectly round, its profound patterns seeming to flow on their own. This jade has accompanied my slumber for 10,000 years. It is stained with my essence. It has become a chaos spirit treasure, he said calmly. Then, before my shocked eyes, he made a light slashing motion with his finger. The pendant became a streak of light and disappeared into his palm. Then his entire body began to grow transparent, illusory. Finally, he transformed into a profound chaos sigil. Shush. The sigil flashed and branded itself onto my chest. A warm sensation spread from the spot. Zane's deep, magnetic voice sounded directly in my mind, tinged with a familiar laziness. Let's go. This place is boring. I looked down at the faint, profound sigil on my chest, feeling that familiar presence once again. The corner of my mouth twitched. So this Emperor Zane, who had just reforged his imperial body and awed the universe. had turned back into an amulet and attached himself right back to my chest? The boat swayed gently. The ferryman, who had risen at some point, pulled the boat. It turned and slowly glided back into the gray mist, toward the way we came. I stood at the bow, the sigil on my chest warm. The chaotic void was slowly being swallowed by the mist behind us. Ahead lay the way home. I sighed in resignation. Hey, I said to the sigil on my chest. So where to next? The sigil grew slightly warm. Zane's lazy voice replied. Just follow your gut. The end.